Well, good morning, everybody. Let's get started. Hope everybody's well. Use the chat, say hello. Welcome to week number 64 of the weekly financial roundtable. Remember, money's not the most important thing in life, but it is like oxygen on the gotta have it scale. So this is a time to gather each week. I'm Tom Kuhn. I'm your host. I am from Qnity. We are here to help people not only earn and keep more money, but also do what they love and have a great quality of life, to go from what's complicated, overwhelming, and confusing into a clearer path to prosperity, using the new rules, which is simple, visual, and actionable. Remember to prosper, manage your ATM, your attention, time, and money. We understand that your time is precious, so thanks for spending it with us today and every other week that you've joined us. Last week's guest was Tam Nijan, and he did an amazing job, really woke us up in terms of many of the opportunities in the nail industry, how the nail industry has evolved, and then also about giving back and also a bit about family business. This week's guest, we have Janet Williams. She's going to join us today. She has an amazing background, an amazing area that she contributes. I can't wait to bring Janet into the conversation. We hope you have some light bulb moments today and that you connect a few different dots for something that might inspire you to move forward. We include the 9 grid as a tool to help you mind map, storyboard, whatever you come up with today. So you can mind map your own light bulb moments. Past recordings have been posted in the Plan for Profits portal, and then also on YouTube. All right, so before we get to, let's have Lauren and Megan come off of mute there for a second. So first of all, we're gonna take the screen share off. Good morning, ladies, nice to see you.
Good morning.
So you each come from Beauty Changes Lives. Lauren, your role?
Good morning. I'm the executive director at Beauty Changes Lives. I'm excited to chat with everyone today.
And Megan, your role?
I'm the director of communications. So anything you see that comes from BCL has come from me and Lauren as well.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. So we have just a few minutes before we get over to Janet to go through some things related with Beauty Changes Lives. Let me come back to this. So for those of you who don't know, hopefully you know by now because we talk about Beauty Changes Lives probably at least once a month, this is an organization, it's a nonprofit that really helps the beauty industry become a first choice career. We all are suffering from current and pending human capital type issues and opportunities. And this is an organization that is doing something about it. All right, so would love to, and Lauren and Megan have an ask today. It's not actually an ask for money, but it's an ask for mentorships. So we're going to spend a few minutes starting with you, Lauren. So give us just a quick overview of Beauty Changes Lives and whatever else you feel like sharing.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So for those of you who don't know, we are a nonprofit that really focuses on supporting professionals throughout their entire career journey. So those of you who have heard of us are probably familiar with our scholarship program. Scholarships are truly the heart of what we do. It's our largest program, and each year we award close to $500,000 in scholarships. But over the last few years, we've really taken a step back to figure out what else the industry needs from us. In relation to that, we've developed other programs. So the one that we're going to speak to today, where we could really use your support, is helping those new professionals. So we have always had a mentorship program that's available for our scholarship winners. And because of that, we see a retention rate about 20% higher than the industry average. So we know that when we're able to come alongside of those new professionals and give them the support they need, they're more likely to stay in this industry.
Go
ahead, Tom.
So we're hoping that some of you may choose to become mentors, to cut to the chase here. But Megan will continue the dialogue here.
Yeah, so the first way that we really want to get everyone involved is for you to, first of all, be a part of our conversation. So if you're not already, please follow us on social media. We post multiple times a day. There's a lot of information that you can either use personally to grow your business, or that you can share with your teams and your the people around you. So please just follow us, and we can always continue this conversation there. Our first ask is that you definitely get on our list. So we're going to be dropping the links into our chat here to become an advocate for Beauty Changes Lives. So you'll get monthly information from us. We're not spammy. We don't want to overwhelm you, but you'll get monthly information from us on what's going on and where you can support what we're doing for the community. And then from there, we would love for you to start sharing your experiences, your stories, and definitely tag us so that we can see what you're up to and we can share your wins with the community as well. But most specifically from this group and your amazing amount of experience that we have in the room, we would love to ask for about 15 people to become mentors. We're looking for, like I said, about 15 folks who have been in the industry, who have different backgrounds, from artists to owners to financial planners, to really help the next generation of beauty pros to reach their potential. And like Lauren mentioned, stay in the career long enough for it to be prosperous for them. The mentorship program is really a fairly low commitment. It'll take about 7 to 10 hours of your time over a 6-month period. So it's one 1-hour meeting with your mentee once a month for 6 months with a 1-hour onboarding with us. We'll check in with you. We'll give you guidelines. We'll give you some talking points to chat with your mentees about if you need help moving the conversation along. We actually give you a whole guidebook of how to structure your mentorship to reach your goals and to reach your mentees' goals. So we would really love to hear from as many of you as possible. We do it starting in January. So we do 2 seasons a year of mentorship. And we're, like I said, we're looking for about 15 folks to join our team.
All right, that's very clear and it's a great ask. I do know, and I've already shared with you, Megan and Lauren, that members of the Qnity team will certainly be taking probably a couple of those slots. So if you're interested, go ahead, look in the chat, reach directly out to Megan and or Lauren. They can get you the application. So guys, this is an opportunity to get involved in the beauty industry and to address a challenge that we're all living with and to actually do something about it. So I suggested that this is a group of activists, Megan and Lauren. So hopefully you'll get some volunteers. Okay.
Thanks,
Great.
Tom.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, guys. All right. Now let's see here. All right. Now, what we're going to next do is we're going to celebrate a new member of our Brain Trust, Janet Williams. Certainly, these roundtables address the subject of money, and we're going to address a subject of money that we haven't really addressed before from a woman that has incredible expertise in this area. Janet, good morning again.
Good morning.
Great to see you. So I will just briefly share our relationship and how we came to today. I know that you and I met 5 years ago when you were with Dessange. I also know that prior to that, you were in the school in DC Aveda Institute, I believe is what it was.
Yeah.
And so you have rich beauty industry experience. And so that was 5 years ago. And we didn't know each other very well at the time. We just had some interactions, all very positive. And then all of a sudden, here's this Janet again, and I keep hearing about Janet Williams, and I'm like, I wonder if that's the Janet I know. And then found out that certainly is the Janet I know. And so you have moved away from being part of a organization to having your own organization, right?
Yes, for the second time.
The second time. So I'm going to sort of close off my intro with you and just connect the dots. So between 2016 and now, where your name first came up is that both of us are involved in Unite as One, which is an industry think tank. A press release finally went out on this like a week ago. And this is the first time in the history of the beauty industry that I'm aware of that all the major associations have banded together to address issues in one voice, including issues as it relates to human capital, recruiting, retaining staff. And also there's so many other matters that need to be addressed, including cultural intelligence. And that is where you came up as the recommended expert. And you have a lot to share and a lot to give. I have done much more talking than I should at this point. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I'm so excited to be here and to have this conversation with your audience. I think it's an important one. And as we will talk today about inclusion as it pertains to money, especially with new professionals, I think that it's a really important topic to have some awareness of, and then be able to offer some action around it as well.
Yeah, so you and I didn't have a bunch of prep time, so I'm really at the edge of my seat here with you and with everybody else, because you got me warmed up when you started to share some stuff. And so let's go there right away. And you were talking about how students view money, how stylists, especially early in their career, view money, and then maybe how that might be a disconnect with owners.
Yeah, so I can give a little backstory around this conversation and fill it in a little bit. As you mentioned, I ran the Aveda Institute in Washington, D.C. for a number of years as the director. And that was an amazing experience and a very eye-opening experience, especially for someone that was coming from a business background and who hadn't worked very closely with students in the past, especially in a capacity where you're training students to be professionals in this industry. And the students are thinking about creativity and being able to produce these beautiful results for guests. And for so many of them, that's the reason why they've gone to beauty school, that's a great reason to attend beauty school. But at the end of the day, it's a business. And as a beauty professional, as a stylist, as an esthetician, as a massage therapist, I mean, any aspect of the business, it is a business. And ultimately, the business exists to make money. And not just for the business, but also for the individual who's providing the service. And so that's where the disconnect begins, because so many of those students that are coming in are not thinking about that aspect of it. Like, this is about me making a living in addition to being able to be creative every day. And then of course, the other side of it is that for as creative as any stylist is, that's not where they live every single day in terms of what they're actually doing. So that's where the disconnect begins. But as we move through the relationship with the students, at Aveda, we were very concerned about preparing those students to be able to function and be successful in the real world, and to understand all of what it entails to do that. And so what we found, and I saw this over and over again, is that the relationship with and the feelings towards money for these students, and also for young professionals, because I spoke and worked with a lot of those as well, they differ along identity differences. And I think that sometimes as we are dealing with, as business owners, as professionals, as managers, as leaders, we're sometimes frustrated by those young people who are so altruistic and so optimistic around being able to be creative and not being able to see the financial side or the business side of what they're being asked to do. So what I saw was that their relationship with and their feelings towards money differ along lots of identity differences. And those identity differences include things like, their ethnic and racial backgrounds, their cultural experiences and their cultural background and upbringing, their socioeconomic status and experience and upbringing, their level of just life experience, because what I was always enthused to see was that we always had students that were a little bit older, who were, perhaps looking at the beauty industry as a second and sometimes even third career. And those were the students that were the most ideal students. They were a lot more mature. They understood the relationship between what they're doing every day and how that translates into being able to earn a certain amount of money, and how to connect their desire for creativity with the compelling mandate of being able to run their own business as an individual, and then also to be supportive of the business for whom they work. So older students, I found, were so much easier in having them connect those dots. And then the other piece that stood out for me was the level of experience that the student might have had prior to attending the Institute, right? So all of these in combination then form what we refer to as an interactive influence model. We couldn't separate one particular element and say, well, this is the element that ties into how a student or a young professional in this industry relates to money. It's not just one factor. It's not just age. It's not just an ethnic background. It's not just a cultural experience. It is the combination of all of those things that are interacting in this individual and influencing how they're showing up in the world in regard to this. So here's an example, and then I'll stop talking because I know I'm probably talking too much, but here's an example. So students are all over the place in terms of what their perceived value around the cost of services might be. So for example, I've had so many students say to me that their expectation, or not even be able to necessarily articulate that this is what's going on, but as you're observing, you're paying close attention to what's happening with them and what their results look like, then you have a sense that this is what's happening. And some have a perception that when it comes to beauty-related services, whether they are hair or skincare or nails, any of those, or even perhaps even massage therapy, that those types of services should be cheap, or in their estimation, whatever affordable feels like for them. And based on that mindset, then that's the level at which they're going to provide services to their guests. So where they are having problems then would be around things like being able to upsell additional services, things like a highlight or a deep condition or any other add-ons that we are all familiar with and that we encourage our young stylists and our students to learn how to do. They're uncomfortable with that. And they're especially uncomfortable with selling products because there is this value, this perception that, oh my goodness, that costs too much. So there's a huge gap there between then how a salon owner or even a school leader is looking at this business and what's compelling and important to the business, and how that student who has that mindset of, things should be inexpensive, they should be cheap, and I'm used to, getting a bargain kind of thing. That's the lens that they're looking at the services that they're providing to their guests. And so working on closing that gap in that student or that young professional's understanding and the goals of the business are going to be are really important.
So then and thank you for allowing me to enjoy my protein shake here. Forgive me, but I didn't have it earlier, and I certainly like to remain proteined up for great thinking like this. So it begs the question, how do you fill the gap? And when I say how to fill the gap, this is a gritty group. They like do this, do that, and these are specific things to do. So how do you fill that gap?
Well, the first step in filling the gap is around education. But even before we get to the education, we've got to start listening. And we really have to recognize that the young professionals and or the students that are in front of us, they're all coming from a different perspective, a different level of experience, perhaps a different mindset, various challenges that may have occurred in their life previously or currently. And so having a sense of who your audience is, who your new employees are, who your students are, all of those pieces are critical. So, and there are lots of ways that you can assess where people are, and having the conversation about just those things that I spoke to. How do you feel about what you should spend on getting your hair done? How much money do you spend on your hair, right? How much money do you spend on shampoo? All of those what additional products do you buy? That kind, what brands do you use? Having those types of conversations with your young employees and with your students is really going to help to create a foundation, a baseline for understanding where they are. And then based on knowing what that baseline is, it gives you a place to go. Because now you can say, oh, wow, this person, has used Perel, or I don't know, some of these brands, Suave, for their whole life. And so their perception of what a bottle of shampoo should cost is that it should cost, I don't know what that costs, $3 or whatever it is, but that's what the shampoo should cost. And so that's what they're thinking about when you're asking them to sell a $20 bottle of shampoo to their guest. They may have problems with that because of what their personal experience is about. So recognizing where they are and then catering your educational efforts to meet them where they are is going to make a huge difference for them. And you'll be able to speak in a language that they can really understand and relate to.
So my action item then, if I'm, 10:23 on a Wednesday morning, I'm multitasking, I'm on this call and I've got 1,000 other things to do, is what I'm hearing I'm going to give sort of prescription based upon what I thought I heard you said. Have the conversation and ask the type of questions that you mentioned. All right. I didn't write those questions down. They were quite good though. And so that's what I'm hearing from you. Have the conversation and ask those type of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And should these questions be asked in a one-on-one with each individual?
It depends. It depends on what the culture of your organization is, right? I mean, and because, with my experience with Dessange, we had a network of over 1,000 salons, and I visited so many of them and provided coaching and training and education to various groups of salon owners, sometimes to their staff members, but mostly the salon owners and managers. And so the environments in each one of those salons was different. Yeah. And so my answer to you would be read the room and determine who we're dealing with. If we are in the habit of having routine staff meetings or routine meetings with the team and being able to talk about things that are typically difficult to talk about, then that can be a group conversation and people will easily contribute to that conversation. But if this is a salon where the team is relatively new, the level of team maturity is not quite there yet, the trust factors are not quite in place yet, then it may make more sense to have those initial conversations one-on-one. And as we get more accustomed to having these conversations that pertain to my personal relationship and feelings about money and about selling and about value perception and all of those things, as we get more comfortable with that, we can start incorporating more people into those conversations. So the answer is it depends.
So we use the word inclusion and money in our title. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that employees, these are primarily employee-based salons that are joining us today, they're going to come from a variety of different walks of life. And to me, it's almost overwhelming to try to imagine all the different walks of life people could have come through. Everybody's had their own journey, but there has to be some very common blind sides that we might miss without learning from someone like you that's dug deeper into this. Because I know, as a former salon owner myself and many people I interact with, I think they understand and feel that disconnect. How do you charge $150 for a color when you're trying to figure out how to pay your gas bill? I get that. We also see at the front desk. Dig a little bit deeper though, and help us understand the inclusion piece and to have an appreciation for people's backgrounds that we may otherwise not know of.
Right. So, inclusion, I think that there's a misconception around what inclusion is. And I think that many people believe that inclusion is about just being nice to everyone. And it's much more meaty and much more robust than that. It really is about demonstrating value and respect for people, no matter what their identity differences might be. And I'm not necessarily just talking about something like, there are obvious identity differences like race or ethnicity or age or sexual orientation, but then there are other ones that are not necessarily as obvious. But the point is that we are making a conscious effort to understand what some of those differences, how some of those differences might show up for people, and that we are creating a space for everyone to have an opportunity within that. A lot of what inclusion really comes down to from a practical standpoint and from a behavioral standpoint is about providing access to people for the same level of opportunity and advancement, if you will, that you would provide to anyone else, not based on what that person's difference looks like. So sometimes it's very difficult to talk about inclusion in and of itself in a vacuum, because there are other factors that tie into that. So for example, another important factor that's going to tie into that would be equity. And equity has to do with understanding where people are and then being able to meet them at that place so that you can get them to the next place that they need to go. That's a very easy way of explaining it. So now when we are then combining equity and inclusion, then we're going to get much more robust and powerful results out of the experience that we're having with people. And that, again, ties back into what I was talking about earlier around, getting a pulse of where your people really are and what their experiences have been in relation to, in this case, we're talking about money. What are their experiences around this and their perceptions around it? And then where do you need them to be? And then let's work towards filling that gap through education, through mentoring, through example, through fun activities in the salon, through goal setting, through incentives, through contests, all kinds of ways. There's all kinds of ways that you can work towards correcting that perception that they may have to get them to the place where that's going to ultimately benefit them and benefit your business as well.
I'd love to see if we have any questions at this point. What a great conversation here. And I'm checking things out here. My mind is just racing with different questions, but also understand that many of you might have some questions for Janet. So I'd love to see if anybody has any questions. Please post in the chat for Janet. What are some typical blind sides? Like something, so let's say I'm committed, let's say I'm a leader and I realize that I can do a heck of a lot better job here. And I need to understand equity and inclusion and really build that into a leadership practice, which comes in one-on-ones and group meetings and really part of the DNA of your company, part of your value structure. But what are some blind spots that many salon owners and managers might have in terms of people's relationship with money?
One is not recognizing that everyone is looking at it through a different lens. I think that that's the biggest one, having this perception that perhaps everyone's had a similar or the same experience, or that everyone thinks about it in the same way. I believe, and this is part of the American way, right? That we are so much of what motivates us is money, but that's not the case for everyone. It really isn't. And frankly, it's shocking to me sometimes as well, because, we've been brought up and conditioned to think about what success looks like. And success for a lot of people looks like how much money you are able to earn, right? And then what you can do with that money to demonstrate how well you've done, right, with what you've earned. But not everyone thinks that way. And so having that level of openness to say that although this is important for me, this really may not be important for Jane or for John or for Sam or for whomever that works with me. So that would be one of the bigger blind spots.
You know, yeah, as I'm thinking through this, there's a disconnect that I have, and I think many others have had. Certainly, we know money's not the number one motivator. And in fact, one of the things we've done, Janet, we did multiple years of surveys where we asked a very, very specific question: which is most important to you right now? Earning more money, doing more of what you love, or having a better quality of life? Money always came as number two, or most often number three. So we know that, and the Unite as One survey we did is true. So we know money's not the number one motivator. Here's the disconnect: yet many leave because of money reasons.
Exactly.
They're not making enough money, and so here's where the disconnect is. And if I'm a you know, I'm not in the human capital business like I once was. I'm not on the front line like everybody else on here, like Carrie Bennett, and, you know, who I just saw pop up here. So how do we close that gap?
Well, I think that there are a lot of things, and I'm just looking at thinking about past experiences around this piece. And I think the number one factor is that sometimes the employee, that new stylist, and sometimes not even a new stylist, it could be a stylist that's been doing this work for 20 years or more, but they may really misunderstand how the business works relative to their own personal financial goals, or also to the business's financial goals and how to get there. Like, you know, in the back of their mind, they're thinking about, well, I need to buy groceries and I've got to pay my rent and I've got this outstanding light bill and my kid needs a new pair of shoes and all of these things, but they are not necessarily tying those compelling needs to the behaviors that they're exhibiting day to day, day in and day out with each and every guest. You know, there's a reason why the consultation should happen, right? And there's a reason why we should be steering the conversation around what that guest's routines look like, so that the stylist then can offer something to the guest that's going to satisfy their need to meet their routine, but it's also going to help them to make a little bit more. So that's an important piece. But there's another important piece that we sometimes forget about, and that is this lack of confidence that stylists may have. You know, they may ultimately, they know that the owner has said to them over and over again, I need you to upsell. I need you to make sure that every guest leaves with a shampoo and a conditioner, or whatever that conversation looks like. But a lot of the times, that individual feels really threatened or intimidated by having the conversation that's going to ultimately lead to the sale. So they're thinking about, you know, again, their own lens. My job is to really have the guest come back by making sure that I'm friendly with this guest and becoming friends with the guest, but they're forgetting about making sure that they're meeting the real need of the guest. The guest is not coming in to make friends with the stylist. The guest is coming in because they have a compelling need around their personal service that needs to be fulfilled, whether that's their hair, their skin, their nails, or whatever the case may be. And that's mission number one. So always drawing that connection for the employee around what is mission number one and what are some of the best ways to fulfill that mission, I think is a really important way that the gap starts to get filled, and staying focused around that.
Annie Wheeler asked a question for you, and I'm going to read it. I would love to hear of an example where you took someone from one paradigm and brought them to understand another one. What has worked to help them make the shift comfortably? Thank you, Annie. Great question.
That is a great question. So I have a lot of examples to that, right? so many of the examples have to do with running a beauty school, but not so much of what happens. Well, let me back up a little bit. At our school, we saw 1,000 guests per week, and I'm not exaggerating, 1,000 guests per week. It was a huge location, and we were extraordinarily busy. So we were lucky in the sense that we had so many students that were providing services, and then they were busy all day long. And so, and these were, of course, students that were close to graduating. So they would have 8 to 10 guests on their books every single day. And they started to see the difference between their results in terms, and they weren't paid a salary, but they were able to make tips. So the difference between the tips that they would make on a $200 ticket and the tips that they would make on a $20 ticket, you know, that's a significant difference. And so that experience helped to close the gap a little bit for a lot of them. Now, for some of them, they were still very, very resistant to the idea of selling. They don't like the language of selling. So we had to be careful about what language we use. And we always had to position the conversation from the perspective of the individual rather than from the perspective of the salon, right? It's not about the salon making money. It's about what is it that you're looking to do in your life. And these are ways that you can get there. So when we changed the conversation and the focus on the conversation, and this is something that we did when I worked for Dessange as well, when we were working in salons and talking to the people in salons, we made the conversation solely about them. It was WIIFM, what's in it for me? And really brought that home for people. That was very helpful. But the other thing that was more helpful was giving them the opportunity to practice that skill set, because so many of them were coming from places where they didn't really have it, and they felt uncomfortable or nervous or intimidated by changing the way that they were interacting with guests. So we gave them opportunities to really practice that. And I know a lot of people hate role play, right? But it really does work. And once you get into the habit of doing it on a regular basis and making it fun, people start to embrace it and they start to get better at it. So it's a process. It's not, this is not let's have one conversation about this and then everything's going to change overnight. That's not what this is. This is we're committed to helping you to have a more successful future and more successful day-to-day outcomes here. And we're going to be talking about it all the time. And we're going to support you in this. And we're going to show you how to do it.
That's excellent. All right. We got Nina has a question. And then with Nina's question, we'll see who else is on with us today. And then I'll wrap up your segment. This is a really fascinating information to me. So here's what Nina, good morning, Nina, by the way. Could you give examples of team building exercises and incentive programs that would help build skills to shift someone's mindset? Now I'm reading that question out loud to you and I'm digesting it myself. I think the best way to do is to separate this because
so team building is one thing. Yeah.
And incentives.
Something else.
So let's go and be as tactile as you can because I know Nina just is sort of like a let's do it type thing.
So team building, there's team building at the end of the day, this is about what's the culture in your salon, right? And does the culture today match what the culture you want looks like? And how much time are we talking about? What do you want your salon to look like 1 month from now relative to 3 months from now, relative to a year from now? And so with that in mind, then you start creating a strategy to get you to that place. So if your salon is one where you're not necessarily encouraging connection with people on a regular basis, for instance, you don't have team meetings and that sort of thing, then you start building up to that. You might want to do something like a great team building exercise is doing a team breakfast, right? Or making sure that you have something that we always encouraged our salons to do. And this was something that I did at Aveda every single day without fail. But we always had a team meeting, a huddle, whether that's a 5-minute session or a 10-minute session, or once a month, we might do have people come in early and do a half an hour or 45 minutes where we bring in breakfast and we just spend some time getting to know each other, because you're going to feel safer and more comfortable delivering on any promise when you feel trust and you feel collaboration and comradeship with the people with whom you work. That relationship building piece has to be there first. Once that stuff starts to happen, then you open the door to be able to have any type of conversation that you want to have. And people are going to be more receptive to it, and they're going to trust you more in those conversations. So that's the answer, I would say. Map out what do you want? How do you want this salon to feel? How do you want people to interact with each other? What do you want this community to be? And then you start working towards doing things to help you get there, and start it with community sort of activities that include food. I'm telling you, food makes a big difference.
Nina, piggybacking on what we just heard from Janet, team building, group activities, one of the best things that we all know in the Qnity model is group 9-grid activities are awesome. Using a large 9-grid, breaking into groups, and make the activities about what Janet is speaking about. But certainly a great way to unpack and get these conversations, get interactions, is to use big 9-grid activity, break into small groups, address the topic, have each small group come back to the full group. It works really, really well. Incentive programs, is that something you want to tackle?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, depending again on the maturity of the team, would determine what type of incentives that you're going to do. As a baseline, I think that the strongest salons are ones that have a goal structure in place. And that goal structure is an ongoing piece that is recognized and where everyone participates. So one of the things that we used to do is that we would have a big board. And on that big board, you'd have everyone's name, and there's a particular goal around retail sales, but then there's also one around services, and that's kind of tracked every single day. And then there are milestones. So when people hit the milestone, and it might look different for everyone. So a stylist who's been with you for 10 years and has a much higher track record around service and around retail, that goal should probably look different for that person than the person who started with you yesterday. Right. But the whole point is that there's an ongoing conversation about it. It's being tracked. There are milestones, and based on who the person is or where they are on the chart, once they hit that certain milestone, it might be, X number of guests that they see by the middle of the week, then there's some type of recognition or small reward that can happen as a result of it. That's just one example, though. There's so many things. I've done a lot of fun things where there's something that's physical that's in the salon that you can put on someone's mirror. And once they hit that particular thing, then the bell gets rung, and then, they get that little icon that goes on their mirror. And then the next person hits whatever that goal is. It might be a sales contest, then they get to put it on their mirror. And at the end of the shift, everybody who was able to sell X number of shampoos gets a certain prize. It could be a monetary prize. It could be a gift certificate. It could be any number of things. It doesn't, at the end of the day, the prize in and of itself really most of the time doesn't matter. It's about the energy that's created, and it's about the recognition that people get, that they feel like, wow, somebody is paying attention to the extra effort that I put into this. And I love that. And I love the way that this is making me feel. That's what's the most important piece around incentives.
All right. Nina says, awesome. Thank you very much. Great answers to her questions. Janet, it's absolutely wonderful having you on. I just noticed on who's with us today, it does include some other fellow members of this Unite as One collective think tank, including Steve Reese and Sam Bricata. Obviously, you, me, Sam, and Steve spent about 90 minutes yesterday going through opportunities with this think tank. And how excited are you about them? I mean, I'm super excited about this group, And I really want to bring it to this audience to make them more involved in Unite as one. And your piece to it is so important because there's 4 different subcommittees: lack of beauty professionals, perception, communication. I'm on the communication group. Then cultural intelligence is what you're on. So if you have a word or two to say about the Unite think tank, Steve Reese just does an amazing job and his leadership on my committee, and I'm thrilled to be part of his committee. He's doing amazing work. So any final comments about that before we wrap up?
Yes. Well, I just want to say shout out to Steve because you blew me away yesterday. I thought that your everything that you presented was so topical, so current and so important and on point. And I love the direction that the entire body of United as One is taking. But more specifically, I'll do a very quick blurb about what we're doing with the Cultural Intelligence Committee. So this piece that we just discussed today around inclusion and money for younger professionals and students is really a small subset of the greater conversation that we're having for the industry around these issues and cultural intelligence. And so as a committee, we have come up with an acronym that we call Beauty Plus, and it symbolizes all of these tenets that help us to move the industry forward through the recognition of people in important ways. And so that Beauty Plus acronym stands for belonging, the E stands for equity, the A stands for agility, talking about cultural agility, which is the path to the end result of cultural intelligence. The U stands for unity. The T stands for trust, which is always running in the background. You know, either we are building it, we're maintaining it, or we're trying to repair it, right? And so that's a really important element to think about. And then the Y stands for you. You meaning that each of us has a responsibility and an obligation to embrace all of these concepts, to learn as much as we can, to make sure that we are creating environments that are inclusive, that where people feel a sense of belonging, and we understand what that looks like. And then the plus includes all aspects of our industry that relate to providing personal services to people, whether it's barbering, whether it's hairstyling, whether it's nails, whether it's aesthetics, whether it's massage therapy, whatever it is, all of these elements of the industry are included in this concept of Beauty Plus. So that's a little bit about what we are talking about through the Cultural Intelligence Committee as part of Unite as One.
So you're on the front line for the entire industry, which is why we're talking about this. You're not just on the front line of your own business. You're really representing some very, very large segments in the beauty. So you're really a voice around this. And I think it's really important for people to understand that. Let me award you the $1 Million Light Bulb in recognition of your membership in the Brain Trust. Let's please give Janet a resounding virtual applause. Please give her a nice little shout out or two in the chat. Share a little love with her and the important work you're doing. And you're so articulate. So thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. It was absolutely my pleasure.
All right, so let's see who we got here today. We've got Terry. Good morning, Terry and Steve. Scott, good to have you joining us today. Hi, Sarah and Sandra Sam Bricado, my local friend, Sadie. Hello, Robert, Rebecca, Philip, Nina, Michelle from Texas, Melissa, Melanie, Marcia, Con, you should listen to the recording from last week. Carrie, Karen, John, Joe, Hayden, Christine, Ashley, Anna, Anne, Andrea, Amanda, and then someone else that's here in the Twin Cities. So anyway, I'm sure I probably missed some people. But anyway, let us see what else I have to share with you guys today. I don't think I have much more. I think this is so timely because money mindset and inclusion. I mean, this is something we took very seriously in our money curriculum that we've been talking about. Anyway, great to have Janet today. We do have a roundtable at noon Central Time. Janet's going to join us again. This is the school roundtable. We're big believers in having a coach, so Qnity in Action could be a great option for you. If you're really looking to build more leadership practices into your business, including some of the things that Janet mentioned. So you're welcome to go to our website, and you can also go here to book a free coaching session. So we are on next week. Michelle, I believe we actually can announce who our guest is. I think our guest is the one and only Will Claybaugh. Is that right, Michelle, next week? Am I right?
You are correct. Win Claybaugh will be with us next week.
That would have been really, I would have been really off if I was wrong on that. So this guy, Win, man, does he have a body of work of contributions in his career. Oh, I mean, when we do fundraisers, we think we, bring in some money. When this guy does a fundraiser, it's like, wow. So anyway, and Win, and I'm going to tell Win this later. It's sort of like Joe Schmo interviewing like Larry King. I mean, this guy has done so many masters recordings and interviews. So I'm like, I'm going to be interviewing and having time with Win. I can't wait. Anyway, that's next week. We hope you had some light bulb moments today. Closing thoughts. The bad news is time flies. The good news is you're the pilot. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Janet, for joining us today. Thank you for those of you that expressed an interest in being a Beauty Changes Lives mentor. And also thank you for allowing me to enjoy my protein shake with all of you. We'll see you next week. Thanks again for today. And we appreciate all of you. All the best.